is the time allotted for comments for the general public on topics that pertain to items on this agenda. The Commission welcomes comments from all persons. However, please recognize the Commission receives evidence through a formal process. Hearings or investigations for all matters will be discussed at this agenda have already been conducted, and draft orders or memoranda have been prepared on the basis of the record created at a hearing or on the final results of staff's investigations. The Commission appreciates any feedback from the public, but comments made today will not be treated as formal evidence. We ask that members of the public desiring to comment, please state your name for the record in the number on the agenda item that you may be addressing. We also request that comments address topics that are relevant to or within the authority of the Commission. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per speaker. If you have any extended remarks or documents, you may submit those in writing to Ms. Tricia Osborne. I have let me ask, are there any members of the public in Carson City at this time who would like to make a public comment? I do have a note from Mr. Fred Volz.
Good morning. For the record, Fred Volz. These comments address item 2A on today's agenda. Under previous commissions, the 2 latest hires for General Counsel and Executive Director had been unmitigated disasters selected by cronyism, failure to disclose conflicts of interest, or personal relationships with candidates, and a rush to fill both positions with a body. This commission has a chance to remedy past errors. Unfortunately, none of the 8 current candidates possess all 4 of the core competencies needed in a replacement general counsel. Those include diverse management experience, not just project management, broad-based utility experience, a personal perspective that views and uses the law and regulatory authority for constructive, not obstructive purposes, and a full comprehension that those who pay public salaries deserve respect and consideration, not dismissive, imperious treatment. The rate-paying public funding this agency also deserves more than the chance to passively observe the interview process. We have seen that probing questions were not asked either by an internal search committee or previous commissioners during the executive director hiring process. Out of the 8 candidates for general counsel, 1, Kate Marshall, has narrow utility regulatory experience in the antitrust and telecommunications fields, but none in the electricity and natural gas arenas, comprising the largest portion of the Commission's work. She also has extensive financial experience and broad spectrum management experience. She would be a qualified replacement for the current executive director occupying her position in violation of NRS provisions, but an unqualified choice for the general counsel position. As for the other 7 candidates, their backgrounds reflect a wide range of material deficiencies, such as inadequate time as a lawyer, non-existent management experience, non-existent dated or tenuously crafted utility experience, and inability to write succinctly about themselves and their claimed accomplishments, inflation of actual accomplishments between cover letters and resumes, rationalizations about being dismissed from for-profit law firms for lack of billable hours, candidates seeking public employment because they are failing to earn a living as private lawyers or are in occupations unrelated to their legal training, and an unwillingness or inability to state how they can add value or what they can do for the PUC. Tellingly, no current candidate demonstrated an informed perspective or even a passing acknowledgement of ongoing PUC issues such as net metering, deregulation, alternative energy sources, or the time-consuming general rate case process. The prudent next step for this commission is to repost the position, hopefully securing fully qualified candidates. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Volz.
And I would ask that my comments be added to the record, please.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public in Carson City who would like to make public comment? Hearing none, are there any members of the public in Las Vegas who would like to make public comment?
We have Angel DeFazio.
Good morning, Ms. DeFazio.
Good morning. How are you? Mr. Chair, I have an administrative procedural question before making comments, and I was wondering if we can address it.
Ms. DeFazio, a public comment period isn't a time for discussion. It's just an opportunity for members of the public as yourself to make comment on the record.
Fine, I'll discuss it on Watchdogs. For the record, Angel DeFazio. Traits like attention to detail, transparency, above reproach, real utility experience. One would hope for a position such as GC. After the last two fiascos when no one on the search committee knew how to vet resumes, we have done it and it's on the record now. Garrett Weir, who wants to be top dog desperately, just read his cover letter. What's really factual rather than bloviating. He's an afterthought for the switch action. July 22nd, he was added as an attorney to notify with Hall. But is he guilty with the PUC attempting to defraud the ratepayers over Tanner's legal defense? He knew Tanner filed a motion to dismiss on September 19th. On October 4th, Potter and France requested a $214,000 contract payment for Tanner. So how can almost a month later hire retroactively a legal rep for Tanner, knowing Tanner's motion to dismiss requested attorney's fees? Claiming time was of the essence when the complaint was filed on July 12th, Tanner's summons issued July 19th, the joinder filed July 22nd, when the response time ran out on August 17th. Claims of major litigation when in fact PUC's 2015 biennial report doesn't really have that many, especially since he's been with the GC's office since 2012. What proof do we have he is the lead attorney or working on them? I have history from Pacer, Washoe Courts, the biennial report, Carson Court, 8th Judicial District Court, only cases filed since he became assistant GC. His sample was from a case closed on 9/20 of 2016. Why not instead of Matt Fox, lead attorney for the switch suit, if he's that qualified and knowledgeable? According to his letter, he's been acting GC. Appointed by who, in what public meeting, when, and for how long? Angie Elquist. She got a real estate license in June of 2016. She listed HR pre-certificate on 2014, yet she has no attention to details, such as never updating her bar license, still showing Mark Ray. Yet on a resume, it shows she left there in May of 2016. There is no listing of her as managing members of these LLCs, Filippini Properties, Bradbury Research, Coles Hill Mountain, and Elquist Mining. When Lander County DA recall attempted, the intent was filed on January of 2012, petition submitted on the 16th, and the notice insufficiency recall failed on April 23rd. Is there a tie to her with the former GC? She ran against Milo Tanner for DA, who now resides in Reno. She worked for the
Ms. DeFazio, if
I
I
have
may
two sentences.
stop you.
I have
Okay,
two.
go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead and complete. Thank you.
She worked in the AG's office when Tanner did. In conclusion, reject all resumes, relist the job, hire someone with real utility experience, and acts in the public interest, sans a deity ego mentality. And please consider offering Kate Marshall the job as executive director. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. DeFazio. Are there any other public comments in Las Vegas?
No other comment, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Hearing no other public comments, I will proceed to item 2A on the agenda, which is for discussion and possible action, review of materials submitted by applicants for the Commissioner's General Counsel position prior to the closing date of October 21st, 2016. I'd like to begin with some comments of my own and would then very much like to hear from my colleagues on the Commission. The General Counsel position of the PUCN is an integral part of our leadership team and to the success of the Commission. And kind of before I talk about things that I'm looking for in the General Counsel position, I'd like to outline the steps that the Commission has taken this far to fill this vacancy. There has been some discussion about the hiring process, and that is open meeting law set forth in NRS Chapter 241. Having myself worked for no fewer than 3 separate Nevada Attorney Generals and worked on numerous open meeting law issues myself, I'm committed to both the legal words of the open meeting law in the state, but also the spirit and the intent. Nevada prides itself on transparency, and I imagine that Commissioner Pongratz, who's also worked for the Attorney General's office, might have similar experiences with the open meeting law as a lawyer perspective. The Commission publicly posted the General Counsel position and received a total of 10 applicants by the close of business on October 21st, 2016. Those 10 applicants were contacted by the Office of General Counsel, the PUC, and of those 10, 8 voluntarily chose to proceed going forward with this public process. 2 of them chose not to, and so their names have not appeared, and they withdrew their applications. The cover letter, resumes, and writing samples of the 8 remaining applicants were attached to this notice agenda for today's meeting. There's been no other pre-screening or interviewing of these applicants. Personal identifying information from their materials was redacted, but there has been no pre-selection committee. As it has been public posted, the purpose of this agenda item on today's meeting is for the Commission to collectively decide who we would like to more formally interview in another special agendized public meeting, which will allow for public comment both at the beginning and the end of that proceeding. It's my intent at this time to schedule the selected applicant or applicants for an interview to be publicly noticed sometime next week, so long as we comply with the 3-day posting requirement. And because the General Counsel works with each commissioner, the chair, and represents the commission collectively, it was something important to me as the new chair of this commission to have the input from fellow commissioners so that whoever is selected as the General Counsel has the full confidence and support of the commission as an entity. I think that's something very important to the commission moving forward. For me, factors that I'm looking for in a qualified General Counsel are as follows: independence, maturity, good people skills and temperament, analytical skills, a strong knowledge of the open meeting law and public records acts in the state, litigation experience, ability to supervise and train assistant general counsels, speak well at public hearings, who's professional, and who's able to work well under pressure. A lot of important, complex, and at times stressful issues appear before the commission, and whoever is the General Counsel needs to, quote, the ability to take the heat. And it's not an easy job by all means. The 8 applicants that the commission has received are listed in the agenda, and again, their materials have been publicly posted. Angie Elquist, Peter Keegan, Mark Lipius, Kate Marshall, Andy Moore, Christine Sullivan, Belinda Sui, and Garrett Wood. And I want to compliment, I think, all of the applicants. It is not easy to put your name, your resume out there into the public realm and have it scrutinized. That in itself can be an intimidating process, and compliment all the applicants for their willingness to do that. And I admire them. Many of the applicants I have known as colleagues, as also some of them as former employees of my Attorney General's office, and they are fine, outstanding attorneys. But of these 8 applicants, the 2 for me that satisfy the criteria that I'm looking for and would like to interview are Ms. Kate Marshall and Mr. Garrett Weir.
No.
They have prior experience with the PUC and some of the qualities that I believe would make a good general counsel. And those are 2 that I would propose that the commission set for further interviews. But I'll leave that proposal out there and turn it over to Commissioner Thompson if he has any comments or suggestions.
Thank you. I also just want to thank the applicants for putting their names out there in public and participating in this process. It's a tough thing to do, and I echo the comments of the chairman that the General Counsel is an integral part of this process, and someone all these commissioners rely on for all the reasons laid out by the chairman. At this time, I have no additional candidates that I would recommend for interview.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Commissioner Pongratz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a couple of thoughts I wanted to add to the discussion today. I agree with the criteria that you've outlined. I would like to add to that a criteria of ensuring that the successful candidate has had some experience in addressing legal matters of complexity comparable to the complexity that they would address as General Counsel to this commission, either in terms of utility experience per se, or matters of a comparable complexity. I think it's the complexity of this legal work and the environment that it has to be done in that's of particular importance to me. I also wanted to say I think it's very important that the commission move forward at this time with the hiring process in view of the challenges that are confronting the commission. We do have a robust set of applications here, and I recommend that we continue the process in an expeditious fashion. In terms of candidates, I would recommend that in addition to the 2 that you have identified, that we also consider interviewing Mr. Moore.
Anything further?
No, thank you.
Thank you. With that, I will make a motion that the commission schedule formal interviews for Ms. Kate Marshall, Mr. Andy Moore, and Mr. Garrett Weir. Does anybody second that motion?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. The commission has approved to schedule formal interviews for, again, Kate Marshall, Andy Moore, and Garrett Weir. The intent is to do so at an evening time next week, and we'll be working with staff on getting that notice publicly posted. Any other further comments?
No, thank you.
I have none.
Thank you. That is a conclusion of item 2A, and we will move to item 2B for possible action, discussion, adopting new standards of ethical and professional conduct to guide the commissioners. This is something that I, as chair, requested be placed on the agenda, and I have a few comments that I'd like to make. And one of those is that we're building a new PUC. And the cornerstone of that effort is integrity and ethics.
Yeah, right.
And I believe that that effort starts at the top with the commissioners themselves. I know that this is something very important to the governor, and it's also one of my focuses as the chair. The commissioners and the commission as an entity must not only maintain but nurture through its comments, behaviors, and decisions the trust of the general public, as well as the utilities we regulate, and all businesses and people in the state, and those who are looking to come here in the future. And I believe that, again, starts here at the diocese with us three. What I propose are self-imposed standards to apply to the commissioners themselves. And it's not to create a cause of action, or certainly not to place any jurisdiction over the Judicial Discipline Commission. That we don't have the authority to do something like that, and that's not the intent. But to serve as instructional guideposts when necessary. As commissioners, we wear several hats. Presiding over contested cases in a judicial role is one of those hats, but it is one that is extraordinarily important. And in doing so, I think it is appropriate and necessary to look to the guidelines that are imposed by our highest Supreme Court, the Nevada Supreme Court, and the Code of Judicial Ethics. Again, this is not intended to be binding per se or cause of action, but are standards for the commissioners themselves to look to for guidance. Additionally included is Governor Sandoval's, the second executive order that he put forth when he became governor in 2011, Executive Order 2011-02, imposing additional ethical requirements on members of his senior staff and cabinet. And though while we aren't members of his cabinet, I think it's appropriate that we hold ourselves to those same standards. And as well, I've also cited to some of our state ethical guidelines in NRS Chapter 281A to serve as a reminder to us all. And again, this standard is self-imposed, doesn't create a cause of action, or is legally binding. It's a policy decision for the commission to hold itself to. But I do believe it's a necessary component of a new PUC, and one that Governor Sandoval believes in creating, and I do as well as the chair. And with that, are there any comments, Commissioner Thompson?
I would just say that I fully support the adoption of this guidance moving forward, and appreciate the chairman for bringing it forward.
Thank you. Commissioner Pongratz?
Yes, thank you. I do have two thoughts I wanted to add. One is, I appreciate the fact that the item does recognize that this agency has quasi-legislative as well as quasi-judicial responsibilities. I am a little concerned that the item makes that reference at the end of the item, and was wondering if we could modify it slightly to add to the very first line, where it says the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada, PUCN, is a quasi-judicial, to add to that, as well as a quasi-legislative regulatory agency. And I asked for that change in part because I am mindful that the revised Nevada Code of Judicial Conduct, in its very first section, 1A, makes an explicit statement that administrative law judges and hearing officers of state agencies, which we could be considered to functions that we serve, are not judges within the meaning of this code. So I think it would be a helpful clarification to add that language to the first sentence.
Thank you, Commissioner Pongratz, and I really appreciate the thoughtfulness of that. And Commissioner Thompson, I think you have the fortune or the misfortune of being with two lawyers up here on this dais, because I also looked at that section myself. And again, the reference to that is to not put us on standing as a district court judge by any means whatsoever, and we are certainly in the executive branch, but it's to be, we do serve those in judicial functions. Some of the decisions before the commission are absolutely of statewide interest and will impact potentially all businesses and residents of our state. And so that's the reason for putting that forward, but I really appreciate your suggestions and comments, Commissioner Pongratz. With that, I would move to approve agenda item 2B as modified by the suggestions of Commissioner Pongratz, so that the first sentence reads, "The Public Utilities Commission of Nevada, PUCN, is a quasi-judicial, comma, as well as quasi-legislative, comma, regulatory agency."
Chairman, if I may, just for a second to clarify, your motion is regarding the proposed modified version or the original version?
The proposed modified version.
So the modifications are as made here on the record and as in modifications filed this morning?
Yes, thank you for that clarification, Ms. Dis. Is there a second?
I would second the proposed modifications to item 2B by Chairman Reynolds with the modifications proposed by Commissioner Pongratz.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. The motion passes unanimously. Moving on to item 3A, was brought to the Commission by the Assistant Commission Secretary regarding the October 26, 2016 Utility Agenda 2016 meeting minutes. Would any commissioner like to pull the meeting minutes for any further discussion or consideration?
I do not.
I do not.
Hearing none, I move that the Commission accept the October 26, 2016 Utility Agenda 2016 meeting minutes. Is there a second?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes unanimously. And on the record, I would very much like to thank the Commission Secretary for the energy and the time in preparing those meeting minutes. Very much appreciated. Item 3B is brought to the Commission pursuant to Section 252 of the Telecommunications Act of 1996. It can be voted on without any further discussion unless any commissioner has any questions or comments.
I have none.
Nor do I.
Will therefore move to approve item 3B in that we grant the joint petition and approve the agreements and amendments and issue the corresponding orders.
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes unanimously. Moving on to agenda items 4A, 4B, and 4C. I was planning to consolidate those unless Commissioner Thompson or Commissioner Pongratz wishes to pull one of those items for additional discussion.
I don't want to make additional discussion.
Thank you.
No. Same is true for me.
Therefore, hearing none, I would move that the Commission approve items 4A, 4B, and 4C and accept the recommendations contained in the staff's briefing memos regarding those items.
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes unanimously. And I'd also like to thank staff for their hard work on those three items. The diligence and hard work that you put into those up front makes it easy for us to review those up here, so thank you. And that brings us to agenda item 5A for public comment. Are there any members of the public in Carson City who would like to give any additional public comment or public comment for the first time?
Again, for the record, Fred Volz.
Hello, Mr. Bowles.
Morning. There's an outstanding issue needing attention by this commission, and it goes right to the issue of ethics and judicial canons that was discussed earlier. On July 11th, 2016, a petition for redress was submitted to the governor through his personal general counsel, who happens to now be the chair of this commission. The sum and substance of the petition and its extensive documentation centered on the continuing violation of NRS provisions by the PUC employing the current executive director. None of the commissioners who made this defective hiring choice remain on the commission. On July 19th of this year, a one-sentence response was forwarded by another one of the governor's employees indicating the petition and the unresolved statutory violation had been passed back to the PUCN for action. But there's been no action taken toward resolution almost 4 months later. Because the commission's chair has in-depth knowledge of this statutory violation and has been in his current position for 5 weeks, the obvious question to ask is, when will official action be taken to remove someone clearly unqualified to hold the PUC executive director position based on their training and prior work experience? It would also be helpful to know, has anyone bothered to ascertain how much PUC employee time has been expended on remedial education with the current executive director so that she can function on some level in her job? She's been overtly unable to perform one of the primary duties of the job, which is making a public presentation on behalf of the PUC. This has had to be done by other staff. Fitness for the position requires financial skills and responsibility, and this person is also the agency's chief financial officer. Someone who fails to fulfill financial obligations to governmental entities, such as non-payment of almost $5,000 of real property taxes for over a year, represents an unacceptable role model for subordinates to follow and poses a potential risk of misusing public funds. The state personnel manual provides for employee discharge through a disciplinary action and hearing process set forth in NAC 284.650, subsection 2, which states one of the grounds for discharge as, quote, disgraceful personal conduct which impairs the performance of a job or causes discredit to the agency, unquote. This problem of an unqualified PUC executive director has festered for almost 15 months with no resolution. So the question I would close with is, when can the general public and ratepayers expect satisfactory resolution of the problem? And I would ask that my comments be entered into the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Volz. Are there any other public comments in Crescent City? Hearing none, are there any public comments in Las Vegas?
Angel DeFazio.
Hello, Ms. Fazio.
Hi, back again. For the record, Angel DeFazio. I was going to read my prepared comments that was tied into the Board of Examiners meeting yesterday, but I'll just have them entered as an exhibit. I'm appearing today for PUC Watchdogs. Question is, did any of you 3 commissioners do vetting? How many without attention to detail, nepotism with WEIR? You want change, then you stop with the current problems with staff enforcing escalating distrust. We don't need any more egocentric attitudes. No more speaking out of both sides of the mouth. Stop with the lack of ratepayer queries, interactions. Your actions feed watchdogs. Only your attitudes can put it on a lower caloric diet. Now, the administrative procedural question I wanted to ask is, according to your agenda page, utility agenda meetings are typically dockets pertaining to regulated utilities. According to the admin agenda description, meeting items that are administrative in nature and that pertain to internal PUC operations do not have to be brought before the commission. Any items that do require a commission vote will be brought in administrative agenda scheduled by the ED. Well, of course, Barbie doesn't know what she's doing. So today you brought an administrative issue onto the utility. And my question is, are you going to start dissolving the administrative agenda meetings? Since there hasn't been one since September of 2015, when the unqualified ED took over. You've been without a GC since June 15th. A few more days to notice this item under the correct agenda meeting will not make a difference. Can you make a decision on this procedure prior to concluding this meeting for further clarification? Because if you pull up the agendas under administrative, it's only on the record from 2010, from February 24th for admin, January 13th for utility. At that point, those are the only recordations. And if you pull up the following, the June 10th of 2015 regarding the ED position, and June 25th of 2013 regarding the GC, you'll see that all of this is under admin. And we as ratepayers have a right to know how a state agency is operating, not with the cloistered attempt ever since Barbie came on, that we don't know what's going on, along with the fact that every 6 months there is supposed to be reports from the people involved with either national, state, local, NARUC, where they're on committees. We have no access to that anymore, and if I didn't do an open records request regarding the annual pipeline assessment, we would not have had that. You're talking transparency. Well, Mr. Chair, we're telling you you're not. Are you going to reopen the transparency through the admin, which was prior to the current ED? Or are we going to keep having a cloistered, we don't want the public knowing what we're doing? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. DeFazio. Are there any other public comments in Las Vegas?
No, Chairman, we have no other comments.
Hearing none. We'll move to adjourn today's meeting. And again, thank you, Commissioner Thompson, and thank you, Commissioner Congress, for your time and attention, for everyone else. Have a good day.